terms of literacy, knowledge. Earlier we talked about literate, illiterate. Today we talk about computer literate and computer illiterate. I mean, not knowing how to access a computer or not knowing how to use a computer seems to have almost got equated to the idea of being literate or not illiterate. And there are serious problems with these kind of conceptualization. Because I do think digital divide comes with a lot of hidden agenda to it. And let me just go through some of these hidden agenda. I'm not saying all of them are necessarily correct, but there are issues that one needs to look at. Now, just to run through the idea of why communication is so important, or why digital literacy, digital awareness has become so important, is we are told that we live in an information society. We are told that we live in a society where if you don't know, it really doesn't mean that you exist anymore. See, it starts with communication, goes to human dignity. The very fact that communication is put even before human dignity speaks volumes of how important communication seemed to be for them. Okay, and then it goes to issues like central role of science. And if you actually see, the more crucial ones includes improving access to ICT infrastructure, information and knowledge, building capacity, increasing confidence and security in the use of ICTs, creating an enabling environment at all levels, developing and widening ICT application, fostering and respecting culture diversity, recognizing the role of media. It's almost like a breathless list, it almost has everything there. But if you actually look carefully, the crucial thing we are talking about is access to ICT infrastructure. And the reason why that's extremely central is when the whole concept of digital divide started, and even now for that matter, even if you look at the new information technology policy of the government, the focus is on making infrastructure accessible, to set up infrastructure. Now, why I do think there is a problem with it, I'll come back to it maybe in a few minutes again, is when you say, I want to put the infrastructure into place, is it really put the infrastructure? Or is there a hidden agenda to it? Why do you want to put that infrastructure? And here the argument that can be made is there are certain normative expectations attached to it. For example, and one of the most well-known cases is what was done some years back in Delhi, where they actually put a computer on the wall and they called the wall the hole in the wall. And they said let children do what they wanted. Now, subsequent studies have shown that the parents are exceedingly unhappy with that experiment. And one of the arguments made was that the performance of the children has gone down. Now, when the internet was put, when the computers were placed, the argument was it's going to give them access. But what did the children do with those computers? They played games. And what was the first reaction that people said? But this is so inappropriate. Now, which means when you put a computer into its place, you give an internet connection, you also come with that expectation that it should be used in a certain manner. Okay. Now, that is where when you say access and when you talk of digital divide, the first question that comes up is, are we already having a preset agenda? Say, I'll give you access, but I want you to use it in a certain manner. And these are extremely central questions. Questions to which I don't think we really have a straightforward answer. But one needs to look into that question. And then if you see further, it talks about role of government. And these are declarations which are binding, technically speaking, because governments have approved it. India has ratified these agreements. Now, how do we define digital divide? There is still a lot of controversy about from where the term came. I mean, who used it first? It's generally used to refer to the gaps between individuals, households, businesses and geographic areas at different socio-economic levels with regard to both their opportunity to access information and communication technology and to their use of internet to a wide variety of activities. So it's not just a question of having access, it's also whether they are able to use it for a variety of activities. Now, why do we put that into the picture? I may have access to internet, it's so slow, it's so unbelievably difficult to get going. So I may technically have access to it, but do I have access to all the websites I want? May not be. Because the logic is I don't have the speed required to even open it. Incidentally, India has one of the lowest or the slowest internet connection for a country aspiring to be the next superpower. Okay. Now, when we talk of digital divide, what are the kind of divide that one could look at? It could be as obvious as rich and poor, and it could be something not so obvious as left hand and right hand. Because for a long time, if you look at a computer, and if you look at the mouse, even the mouse, it was essentially made for the right. Others include male, female, underdeveloped, developed, ignorant, and the knowledgeable. Extremely problematic terms, I'll come to it. And what do you find? Those who fall on that side invariably get clubbed into what they call as computer illiterate. And now what are the other divisions within divisions possible? High speed, low speed. Now when you say high speed, when we talk of broadband connection in India, you should see the broadband connection in some parts of the world. The country which has the fastest broadband connection across the world is South Korea. Network and standalone system, do you have access to network cable connection, or are you still stuck with a dial-up connection? PC versus Apple. And then you have the various variation. See, of this, the last is extremely significant when we talk about commercial versus open software system. Because when we talk of digital divide, we generally talk about the computer, the internet, the speed. What we don't talk about is the software. Because more than the computer itself, or more than the internet connection itself, it's a software which can be phenomenally expensive. And what's more, there's almost a built-in obsolescence to it. It gets outdated in no time. And what's crucial, those who talk about digital divide, especially in the global economy, rarely talk about software. For them, digital divide is providing computers, providing internet. Forgetting the fact that in many cases, the software that is required to function can be so expensive that it's beyond the reach of a lot of people. Okay? Now just to run through some graphs that I have. If you see here, you can see that the mobile subscription is shooting up. More and more people are accessing internet through the use of mobile phones. But if you look at the subscription level, you'll find that in case of individual using internet, it's still 40.4% of the people. You see the possibility. Chances are that in the next 25-30 years, it's not going to be computers, it's not going to be laptop, it's going to be the mobile phone, which is going to be the main means by which people access the internet. And as a consequence, when you look at even websites, and when we talk in terms of access, it's exceedingly central that are they even catering to those who actually access it on the mobile phone? The kind of mindset we have is, people access internet, people get into the digital world only through either a laptop or a computer, which is not true. Bulk of them are now using a cell phone for it. You can see the vast difference in terms of subscription per 100 people. It's catching up, developing world is catching up. But one doesn't know how long it's going to take before they actually catch up. We are told that they will probably catch up to the developed world by 2050. Can you see the Asia and Africa? And Asia, in fact, should not make us feel a little better, because when you say 7.7, it actually includes Japan and South Korea. So if you look at countries like India, it gets included in it, so it looks a lot better. 78% of households in developed world have access to computers and internet. Developing countries about 31.2. It's catching up, as I said, we are told it will catch up. Africa is the one which is getting the most attention now on this issue, because you can easily see 11.1. I mean, it's way below what it should be. So if you again look here, Asia Pacific 32.4. And again, if you look interestingly here, generally when we talk about the Arab states, we look at them as a kind of beyond backwaters. They still have an access which is higher than what we have. In terms of language, you see any Indian language there? See, in terms of linguistic divide, in terms of language, it's changing over the years, the amount of non-English websites are increasing, but it's still English all over the place. China does catch up rapidly because Chinese do use only their Chinese website. They have their own Facebook, they have their own Twitter, so they have their own way of functioning. And a lot of other English websites also get jammed. But in terms of language, it is a serious issue. See, it's very comfortable for us to sit here and say English is a language we speak. What percentage of Indians speak English? But the world is growing. Internet access is shooting up. In fact, yesterday I had shown the same data. If you look in terms of the number of people using it, it's going up extremely rapidly. For example, if you look at Twitter, if you look at this data, for instance, 3 billion people are going to be online by the end of this year. More and more people are getting in. Now, why are they getting in? Is it because they want to get in? In many cases, they get in because they don't have a choice. Because I do my banking online, I do my trade online, I book my tickets online, and I buy books online, I shop online. And what is the incentive? I get a concession for it. See, the fact is, look at the comfort of it. I don't have to stand in a queue. Some of us at least know what it was to buy a railway ticket. No, went and stood in a queue for hours together. You don't have to do any of it. So the advantage is that not only is it convenient, it comes with a discount, it's cheaper to do it. And as a consequence, are we being pushed into it? Today, what does the government say? All service deliveries are going to be online. And we are told by the government they are going to do more and more online service. So the need to be there is greater. And yet at the same time, when we say need to be there is greater, comes with a number of other complications, including privacy, data being put into the net, etc., etc. India is the third highest users of internet in terms of absolute number. And we are told within a short period of time, I'm told by the end of 2015, the largest number of Facebook users in the world would be Indians. The largest number of Twitter users are also going to be the largest very soon. 83 million Indians are already on Facebook. And what's more, I'm told that every tweet we make is in the library. Congress Library has a copy of it. And which means it can come back to haunt us any day we want. And then you have 1 billion websites. And this is increasing by the minute. Okay. 3.5 billion search per day and 1.2 billion search per year. See, the argument that's to be made here is, today it's those students who don't have access to internet and those who are not able to use a Google search. How do they even manage to write their assignments? How do they manage to do their work? Because we take it for granted that they are going to be getting data from online. Now, the assumption is they all have connections. They can all access it. Universities don't give them complete access. So we assume they have it at home. It's a lot cheaper than what it was. But even then, if they have to go and pay for it, not all families can afford it. These are the central questions. It's not just a question of providing the technology. And what is more, 30 trillion unique URLs. Now here again an interesting story. When we talk in terms of the digital divide, and when you actually type of data, you ask for some information. It comes in pages, millions of pages. Any idea how they get ranked? Why is it some come right on top and some goes into the 310 millionth website?
Number of times it's cited, linked.
One is that today there is a market for it. You can actually pay for your way to go right on top. So when we say that we are accessing net, we are accessing data, chances are we are looking at those sites which either has a large number of following, more crucially have paid to be put right on top. It's catching on. It hasn't become a big business as yet. But I do presume in the next couple of years, it is going to be a big business. And if you look in terms of India, what's the internet penetration? 19.19. You know, living probably in Pune, Mumbai and other places, we assume that everyone is online. 19.9 and it's increasing very, very fast. But even if you grow at the rate of 8.3 or whatever percentage we are growing, the fact remains that it's less than 20% as of today, this is 2014, as of today, who are online. The only consolation we can say is compared to what we were earlier, we have moved way ahead. Now, if you break it down in population-wise, you will find that online population are between 15 to 24 years age, that is 36%. 39% are 24 to 34. As you grow older and older, by the time you reach the age of 55 to 64, it's about 3% which is online. So which means that older people accessing internet is about 3% of the total. But it's almost assumed. And you know what, in my case it becomes a double whammy, because one older and a woman. Okay, and they don't expect an academic to be online, so it adds to it.
Yeah.
For example, in 2001, every data handling piece of technology held by people in developing nations, there was 6 times that in developed world. But I thought this gives you an idea of what kind of comparison needs to be made, rather than merely look in terms of how much infrastructure is put in place. In 2006, the developed world had 3 times as many. So by that measure, we could conclude that the gap has narrowed. But in 2001, the developed world had 10 times as much information processing capacity. In 2000 times, it was 14 times. So in terms of information processing, information being put on the net, the developed world was actually getting more and more rather than getting less and less. So if they were accounting for 10%, they were becoming 14%. And suspicion is, it's galloping on that front. Now another thing which has often been said is a digital phenomena will help in terms of what is called as, should be hyper-localized. The argument is it's a completely postmodern technology. Every local people can have access, and they will put up data which they want. So if I'm in Pune, I put up data which I feel is important for Pune, and expect the world to read it, because Delhi doesn't care for us. Data today available doesn't prove this. In fact, one of the things I had mentioned even yesterday, the study we are doing on elections, traditional media didn't cover Northeast at all. So when we looked at Twitter, we said, let's see if Twitter, Facebook was actually talking about Northeast. Even they didn't. People in Northeast were tweeting about issues on India, taking cues from the traditional media. But what were they talking about local area? Hardly anything. Hardly anything. And even a party like BJP, which claims to be so concerned about communication, social media, etc., we're not using it to communicate to the Northeast. Which means those people who get left out in the traditional media are yet to get onto the bandwagon even now. Whether these media are going to help them in the long run, we don't know. And to add further, today when I want documents, I want articles, okay? Chances are that I go to London School of Economics blog site to get data. The logic of it is, one, I do think LSE is a good institution. The second is universities in India do not have a blog site. For example, University of Mumbai, we tried our best to tell, let's have a blog. They said blogs are childish, they are for playthings. Academics don't put up academic stuff there. So even now when I want information, I'm going to LSE, I'm going to Oxford, I'm going to Cambridge, I'm going to X, I'm going to Y. And to make matters even more complicated, today those universities are running online courses. Okay?
MOOCs.
Now, MOOCs. Now, where are the students going to register? Today it's still expensive. Once it gets a little less expensive, some of the MOOCs are completely free, but they don't get credit. So it doesn't add to a degree. Okay, so once it gets cheaper, which it will, and if it gets a credit-based system, and if it leads towards a degree, who would want to do a degree in University of Mumbai if Harvard is going to give them a degree in the next few years, sitting at home, at the comfort of their home, not at a very expensive rate, and probably learn according to their own speed of learning? See, these are central questions, and my suspicion is it's going to happen. And what's more, the complete standardization that's going to happen. We are going to learn what they are going to tell us to learn. And especially when there is no such competition coming from within. And are the local universities waking up to it? They are not. Now, framework for analysis, what are the major issues that could be looked up, or, to just give a kind of analytical framework. It could be technological access, which would be in terms of infrastructure, broadband, software, etc. Social access would include affordability, awareness, language, content and usability, location, literacy, digital literacy is important, technological skills, social and cognitive skills. See, today technology is comparatively user-friendly. It doesn't take much to learn it. But the kind of hesitation is still there. There's a very large number which would still hesitate to get into it. And more crucially, though we say that it's easy to get it, technology by definition comes with a lot of ideological background. For example, when you look at the internet, it has two competing ideologies built into it. One is the defense ideology, completely rigid, hierarchical, the code. The other extreme is the hacking community. The hackers played the most important role in the growth of internet. Both have come into it. So what happens in the bargain? There are times when you can easily access. There's that fun and play to it. At another level, it's extremely complicated, it's extremely rigid. Unless you are a technical person, you can't even access it. So when you talk in terms of access, it's important students get to know how to use it. Then comes in, what are the social uses? We generally think of it as information seeking. We assume that internet must be used for seeking information. Now, ask the younger generation, they would question this assumption. They would say that, why do you assume I have to learn? Is learning the only thing? No easy answers to it. The next is resource mobilization, civic engagement, social movement, social inclusion. Internet is being used extensively for social movements. Today, so much so that we actually talk about cyberspace-based social movements, interlinking, networking on issues, getting people to hear. It may be a lot of noise, but noise do matter because at least someone is going to hear that noise. When the whole idea of digital divide actually caught the public imagination, it was when the Sesame Street was developed, a workshop. The president is supposed to have used the word digital divide and said we need to bridge it. Now when you talk in terms of bridging the gap, what are the digital divides that you want to bridge? One is between countries, massive difference between countries, and the second is digital divide within the people. Now, when you talk of digital divide and the bridge, the argument is, on one extreme you have people who have complete access, at the other extreme you have people with really no access. And when you say I'm going to bridge the gap, how are we actually going to bridge the gap? Are you going to actually tell people that they have to move from here to this extreme? Questions to which countries need to find an answer. And today when we talk of how to bridge the gap, these are the possibilities which are suggested. One is to distinguish between access, skills, economic opportunity and democratic divide. To actually say that bridging must mean, one, develop more skills. Governments need to make policies by which access is made possible. Second is to develop skills. People need to use those facilities. Because you can't assume that once a technology is put in place, people are going to access it. Third, economic opportunities. Because once you learn the skill, you know how to access it. What are you going to do with it? See, unless there is a certain kind of outcome that's going to come from using these technology, people are not going to use it. So if people get onto the net and don't feel the benefit coming from it, probably they're not going to use it. And lastly, of course, is the democratic divide. The argument being that what you have is not just digital divide. You actually have digitalization of inequality. The inequality is already there. It's already present. What the digital divide is doing is just to show that in the digital world. So unless literacy is handled, women's empowerment is handled, digital empowerment is dealt with, illiteracy is dealt with, power supply is dealt with, unless these kind of issues are dealt with, chances are it's not going to make a difference. The same is put forth. Wright describes, he says, 8 aspects of this digital divide: physical, financial, cognitive, design access. Now what does he mean by design access? Some of the websites
Can you
need
go
to...
to cognitive access before?
Cognitive is in terms of, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
See, cognitive is in terms of ability to use it. The ability to use these facilities. And whether you are able to actually correlate and understand how you're functioning with these technologies. For example, I know the technology is there, I know the internet is there, I know the digital framework is there, but I don't even know how to correlate, I don't know how to use it. I don't know how to deal with those, what I'm expected to do. For example, functions are given. I know I can do e-banking, but I don't even know how to enter the data. I don't know how to use those facilities. So the question is in terms of, it's not just a skill, it's also a question of being able to react to those skills, to think and react to those issues. Okay. Then you have financial access, design access, content access, if all the documents are in English. Google does translate, but we know how it translates. Okay. I mean, it might as well not translate. Production access. Now, when you say production access, one of the things we talk about social media is production. I can put data into the net. I will write, I will put, people will see it. Yes, I can start a blog. Today, if I want, I can start a blog. Okay. I'll be one of the 1 billion plus person in the blog. Who's reading it? How do I even make people know I have a blog? And if you try to scroll, you use the Google to first search for my blog, maybe it's at 3 billionth on the list. How many do we read in the language? When you're searching for data, 1 page of information you probably look, second, ambitiously third, extra ambitiously 4th page. After that, what? So if I'm that 1 billionth on their list, not a soul is going to look at me. Even if I have brilliant blogs, no one reads it. See, that's where the digital problem comes in terms of production. You may have the finest document on earth, and you may have put it online, and it may be the best possible source of information. But unless it comes within the first 3 or 4 pages, the access is going to be almost nil. So similarly, if you look at it, if you look in terms of, say, a Twitter account, you have 3,000 people following you. Narendra Modi has 1 million people following him. Who is going to reach more people? You may have the best ideas in the world. If you're lucky and you have 3,000 followers, 3,000 followers and their followers. But when you start with 1 million, you see the multiplying effect. And that's also the reason why when we say there's a production in place, you can put up what you want. Yes, all of us can put up what we want. There are enough of free blogs available. But blogs are also to be read. And it also depends on the language. Now let's say I put up a blog in Tamil. Okay. First, I as an individual don't get to be read. Tamil as a language is read by a very small number. So who's going to read it? And then comes the whole question of institutional access and political access. Now institutional access is simple. You put up an article from this center. You put up an article from University of Pune. Who's going to have a better access? People are by definition going to see University of Pune more than they see a non-government institution. See, here the question is not in terms of whose product is better, whose publications are better, who has put up better data. These institutions by definition get a larger number. And political access includes the fact that when you talk in terms of digital divide, it's also a question of what kind of politics that you're indulging in. Studies after studies will tell you right-wing people use the internet far better than the left. But in terms of political access, you'll generally find that those belonging to certain ideological groups seems to perform much better. And right-wing generally does. BJP is a great example of it. I mean, look at the kind of reach that they have. And incidentally, BJP is not only in terms of their own website, their friends, their volunteers. It has a huge multiplying effect. So to conclude, if one were to study digital divide and one wants to do more research on that, the aspect I would think they should concentrate are technical. Yes, software should be one of the main issues. Because software is the crux, it's the heart of your technology. And open software is something that probably needs to be looked at more carefully. Because proprietary software is by definition phenomenally expensive. And it's often beyond the reach of most people. For example, governments by definition should be using software, which is free, which they don't. So it's in terms of improving hardware. Connectivity quality, I think, is extremely central. Many of us who have sat in front of a computer waiting for 1 hour for something to download know what it means. For example, I've seen some of the universities abroad where it's so fast. And not only is it fast, it's completely free for students. They can log into their computers in university. It doesn't happen. For example, even a university like ours, University of Mumbai, we don't give students that kind of access. Then comes autonomy of location, location of access, freedom to use the medium as one's preferred activities. So if, for example, if I actually want to get online to play games, is there something wrong about it? But you know what? If you look at many organizations, they actually don't give you access to it.
Yeah.
So it's a question of use pattern, type of uses of the internet, what are we using it for? Social support network, availability of others one can turn to for assistance with use. So this is an interesting aspect. And this is where perhaps we need to learn from the games. You know, all online games work on reciprocity. It works on help. So if I have a problem with some game and I want some clarification, I write to someone else or communicate with someone else who's also playing the game. And they would normally give you input saying that, okay, try this, do this. Now, outside the gaming community, we are not doing that. You know, we are not even doing that, and that's the strange part of it. You know, while gaming community works brilliantly, all game community does that. They have a support system. On the other hand, when I'm on the internet and I'm doing some serious reading work, and I have some issue, I can't even write to someone and say that, you know what, I'm not able to access this, I'm not able to do this. Or to say that, you know, I don't have subscription to Sage Journal. So can you actually help me with this one article? Unless I have some relative, friend somewhere who has access, I don't. See, these are some of the issues that needs to be looked at. This kind of a sharing could go a long way in dealing with a whole lot of issues. And finally, skill, one's ability to use the medium effectively. These are what I would say are the broad parameters as far as digital divide is concerned. As usual, I've talked much more than I should. Anyway, I'll stop here. Any questions?